Alright, so now I'm tying in the plug for the boat wiring harness, or the engine wiring harness, permanently in. I had a temporary wiring here before, so that hopefully if the wiring in the boat is okay, I'll be able to plug into the boat and use the controls in the boat. So one of the first ones I had to figure out was this white wire here. This was pretty easy because I still used a white wire as a replacement wire, and it's color coded, and I know that goes right up to the switch block on the Thunderbolt ignition here to this white terminal. So get that one in. This blue wire I had already put a eyelet on because I knew that this blue wire goes over to one of the two posts on the solenoid. Unfortunately, I just tried it, and what I didn't realize at the time was that the hole diameter on this is actually just a tiny bit small. It doesn't want to go onto the stud. So luckily I made that long enough that I can cut it off and put a new one on. Well, it turns out the terminals that I do have that are the right size for this wire are the same hole size as what's on there, and they're just a tiny bit small to fit on there. And then when I go to the next hole size up, all the terminals I have are for larger diameter wire, so I don't have the exact one that I need. So I decided just grab a drill bit, and I'm going to drill out this to the next size. So what I did was I took the terminal that was the same size as this one downstairs, found out which drill fits through the hole, and then grabbed the next size up.
What are you doing? Why isn't it working?
Yeah, because this is such a thin piece of metal, and that, because of the size of the drill bit, it's not very easily biting into it. But it did make it a little bit larger on that side. Actually, if I just drill it the same way on the other, in the other direction, it might actually do it. See how close that is. I want it just large enough to go onto there and still preserve as much of that metal as I can. Not working. This has just a tiny bit more metal on it. I guess I should drill one of these out and change that one. If I had, let's see, I could use this block of wood down here. Oops.
But
The whole motor moved. All right, I think this went through. Yep.
now you have to move it back.
Yeah. All right. So it should fit over that now. And it does. Okay. So now I got to change this. I got to cut this off and change it out. Come on. There we go. Boy, those squirrels are angry.
Daddy, is it the time of year when Jack Farm figuring out?
Yeah.
I already checked.
Annie?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
No, definitely got a ton of acorns. Maybe the squirrels took them all, because I thought we had some earlier in the year.
Yeah. I found one.
Yeah, so the trees definitely made them. The trees were producing them. You know what? That's loose. I never tightened that bracket.
What bracket?
Huh?
What bracket?
The solenoid bracket for the starter. Oh, Jan's home. Yeah, I'm gonna need to open it and wrench to tighten these. Alright, so now the other wire I've got to deal with, I've got this black wire This black wire is actually common to the large ground pin. It's also common to this large ground cable that is already bolted down to the cowling here. And this actually runs over to the other post on the solenoid. So I actually ran it through this strain relief, and I'll just double it back. And that way I'll leave it a little long, just in case down the road for some reason I discover I have to redo it. Hopefully I won't. Oh, I gotta drill out another one of those. Got a lot of these style here that would fit, but I don't like that style because if the screw becomes the slightest bit loose, this will come off. Looks like I used the last one of those.
Can you reuse this one?
Huh? No, I cut that one off. It's got a piece of wire crimped in it. These are crimp connectors. You crimp them once and that's it. They're only good for one shot. Alright, I do have some more of these electrical connectors in another box downstairs, so I'm going to go take a quick look and see if I can find one before it gets dark. Alright, I'm going to have to quit because it's getting dark, but I've only got 2 wires left to go. Alright, one wire is the electric choke wire, and the other wire is the tachometer wire. Now, I know that the choke wire should be common with the far left-hand pin over here on this connector. So if I take my ohm meter and I go to this purple wire, I get no continuity, and if I go to this green wire, I get continuity. So this green wire is my choke wire. So that's easy enough. That runs up here to the electric choke solenoid. So all that leaves after I connect this up is the purple wire, which is the tachometer wire. It goes to the tachometer connector on the front of the Merc control, and that tachometer connector has a plug going in it. It goes to a tachometer on the dashboard, which I have no idea whether it works or not. That would be a handy thing to have. But my problem is that I think, if memory serves me, this purple... Hold on. Alright, what I was saying is that the problem I have with the tachometer wire is I know where it goes in the boat, but in the motor, I got kind of a conundrum because I think this wire ran up to this spot up here on the switch box. So right over here on the switch box, there's a terminal that hasn't been used, or that in the wiring diagram is shown as disconnected or not connected. But in the actual application of this motor, when I was taking it apart, I'm pretty sure that's where this tachometer wire went, which is kind of weird. So, I don't know. According to the wiring diagram, the tachometer wire is supposed to go to one of these alternator connections. So apparently it's supposed to be using a pulse from the alternator to determine the RPMs. Strange. Alright, getting pretty dark, so I don't know how well it's going to show up on the camera, but here's my choke wire, and that actually went underneath this little clip right here and then goes up to the choke. So that's done. And then I ran the tack wire up and left a couple extra inches in case it does end up going to the switch box, and then cut off the excess. So if it does have to go to the alternator, I'll be able to take it back this way and the wire will be long enough. So that actually completes the wiring, except for the tack wire, that completes the wiring of the wiring harness plug to the engine. And I'm going to quit there tonight because it's getting too dark. Hey everybody, it's Wednesday, December 9th, 2016. It's about 34 degrees out right now, and it's going to get really cold this weekend. I just finished, I was just in the process of editing what's going to probably be the last Tower of Power video for 2016. Originally I had hoped that I was going to get this in the water and do a quick test of the whole setup before it got too cold, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So unfortunately, probably going to have to wait until spring of 2017 to play with this in the water. I had just finished doing the video that showed me doing a little bit of wiring, which I actually had done well over a month ago, I think. But I hadn't gotten around to editing it because it was kind of a short video, and I was actually hoping I was going to be able to add on putting it in the water and a little bit of, test running, but that's not going to happen. But I wanted to talk about the tachometer situation, because there might be some people that are using these videos, oh God help them, they might be actually using these videos for guidance technically. All right, so let me show you the tack. So this is the tack that was in the boat when I got the boat, and you can see it's not really in the boat that well. It's just kind of slapped in there. The dash is actually cracked right in the area where the hole was for the boat. There's clearly, looks to me like there was probably some kind of a metal trim or something that's missing, unfortunately. But that tachometer, I don't know whether or not that is in the original tachometer that went with this motor setup or not. All right, so that right there is the plug that's on the front of the Merc control unit. That little plug right there actually goes to that tachometer that I just showed you. Then inside the Merc control, that wire transitions to a wire that goes to the main wiring harness for the boat, which in turn goes to the plug right here that goes onto the motor. And it corresponds to one of these pins on here, which I don't remember which one, but I think I just covered that earlier in this video that you're watching, so go back and find that if you need to. And then that goes to a wire that originally went to a screw terminal on the switch box, which is what they call it, the switch box, when it's an electronic control, it's an electronic ignition module. But there was a terminal on there that wire went to. Now when I looked at the wiring diagram that I found online for this motor, oddly enough it showed that tachometer wire not going to the switch box, but going to one of the two screws for the alternator. So they were using the AC coming out of the alternator, the pulses from that, to actually run the tach. And that led to some confusion, on my part anyways. If you're a Mercury tech, an old Mercury tech, you wouldn't be confused at all. But I digress. So here's the skinny. Way back when this motor was originally manufactured, and this series came out back in, I don't know when it actually came out. This is a 72, we figured that out. Okay, early on in production, Mercury had a special tachometer, I guess, made for them or sourced, that actually ran off of the pulses that come out of that terminal in the switch box. So that tachometer, if you have one of those old style tachometers, I think if you hook it up to the alternator connection, I don't think it'll work, and maybe it even damages the tach. I have no idea. The wiring diagrams I find online for this motor, because they had this motor in production for such a long time, most of the wiring diagrams that I find online are actually for the later versions. And shortly after, I think, production on this thing started, they made a decision to go to a tachometer that uses the AC pulses from the alternator to run it. So how did I find all this out? Quite simply, because there's a lot of guys out there that actually are still running these old ones, and they're finding that their tachometer's not working, so they work on the tachometer, try and figure out what's going on with it. And if they find the tachometer's bad, they'll often buy a tachometer online, which is supposed to be maybe for Mercury's, but when they try and run it, it doesn't work. And the fix is, apparently, just moving the wire from the switch box location over to the alternator if it isn't already there. So if your wire for your tachometer is going to the alternator already, it means you've got a later generation already, which is designed to work with, I guess, the more modern replacement tachometers that are available. if you have it go into the switch box and you get one of these tachometers, apparently it's not going to work. Unless you can find a new old stock or a good used tachometer from that era that was designed to work off the pulses from the switch box, which I've checked. Not that I would necessarily want something that old anyways, but it turns out they're pretty darn hard to find. So for the time being, I'm leaving my wire disconnected because I don't know whether or not that tachometer I have up there, I don't know which one that is. I don't know whether or not that's an original old tachometer that might actually be good and has to have the wire hooked to the switch box connection, or is that a later tachometer that somebody stuck in this boat and it never worked because the guy didn't realize that it needed to be switched over to the alternator. Too many questions, so we're just going to leave it disconnected for now. But I wanted to mention it in case somebody's actually looking at this video for a little bit of help on their tachometer on their old Mercury outboard. So see you in the spring as far as this is concerned. But again, love it if you like what you see, please please subscribe to my channel, and I'm gonna have a lot of other stuff coming up. You know, the usual kind of mix of different things there, and hopefully you guys are liking the content. I'm trying to keep things going here, but it's difficult. Anybody who does YouTube will tell you that it's a lot of work to do the editing and everything else, and provide good content and everything else, and everything else, and everything else, and everything else.